In a world full of Christian podcasts, only one is pants optional. Live from Brea, California, it's the Vox World Headquarters Vox Podcast. All right, Andy, do your voice.
Grab a Coors Light.
Ooh, I like that one.
Settle up. And drink the poison.
Hey. In a world, do that line.
In a world.
Oh, that's so good. This Lego Batman.
Knives.
Andy just pulled a book off my shelf called A Thicker Jesus. And then said, "Is that what you aspire to?" I punched Andy in the mouth.
Punishment.
All right, so welcome to the Vox Podcast. Thanks to Erre, we got a new app called Movie Horn. I love it. And then there's one that we'll use later called the bleep button. And so let me just try this one on. Andy, what the are you doing? Andy, come on now. Why in the heck do you?
There was nothing to insert there.
I know. I just kind of. But all right. What the heck? Drive the truck. No, I can't do it. I can't even do the bleep.
Drive. What am I driving?
I don't know. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen.
The abuse I experience on this show.
Oh, yes. Well, speaking of abuse, my inbox landed with about 30 emails yesterday. I had it under, Andy, I had my emails down like under 20 for the first time in a long time. And then boom. So what happened? These were all Vox Podcast form submissions.
Yeah, my workflow was a little off in how I ingest some of the emails that come in that are questions.
So my workflow was off.
Yeah.
In other words, I didn't do it.
No, I just I just haven't effectively forwarded you on a lot of questions that we have to do the podcast. So.
We'll just call that workflow issues instead of just a lack of commitment. So what happened, I mean, we have literally, I don't know, 20 questions, something that have all sorts of things. So we're going to call this episode, hold on. We're going to call this episode, let me get it going here. We're going to call this episode the Vox Mailbag. Lots of questions and comments. Not all of them are positive. All right, so we'll start. My brother lives in Sacramento, and he has this discussion group. It includes loads of folks that aren't like Jesus kind of people, and so he forwarded me an article that has evangelical Christianity become sociopathic? Okay, was the name of the article. He said, "This was our group discussion recently. We talked about how this is what some people are saying about evangelical Christians and their love of Trump, how your voice and others are needed. They asked for your thoughts." So, here we go. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Has evangelical Christianity become sociopathic? Yes.
Your worst nightmare.
Evangelical Christianity is coming for you.
What happens when you elect a president who agrees with all your religion
and turns out to be as mature as Seth Erre?
Oh my God. I don't know who that's insulting.
Oh, well, that's true. That's true. Okay, so here's a bit of the article. This will be question number 1. Since evangelical Christianity began infiltrating politics officially in the late 70s, there has been a disturbing trend to limit or remove rights from those who don't meet the conservative idea of an American. Many of these initiatives come in the form of religious freedom laws, which empower discrimination, while other legislation targets immigrants who believe differently. The result has been a sharp division in American culture and the redefinition of Christian theology. Tony Campolo, an evangelical author, said Christianity was redefined in the mid-70s by the positions of pro-life and opposing gay marriage. Suddenly, theology fell into the background, he said, and somewhere in the middle of the change, evangelical Christianity crossed the line of faith and belief to hatred and abuse. Those who cruelly implement the actions of their faith are oblivious to the destruction they cause to their religion or the people their beliefs impact. Is it fair to call it sociopathic? Psychology Today lists 16 characteristics of sociopathic behaviors, which include untruthfulness and insincerity, superficial charm and good intelligence, lack of remorse or shame, poor judgment and failure to learn by experience. Jesus, I'm reading this. I'm like, maybe I'm sociopathic too. Pathologic egocentricity and incapacity for love, unresponsiveness in general interpersonal relations, specific loss of insight and general poverty, and major affective reactions like appropriate responses. We see examples of this in the kinds of behaviors in church leaders and followers. Franklin Graham stated that immigration was not a biblical issue. His stand fits well within the conservative politics and vocal support of Donald Trump, but his callousness toward immigrants and those seeking asylum in the United States goes against everything he says he believes. And then there's some Bible verses that are quoted. Yet Graham doesn't see one bit of irony between his political stance and his religious belief. Nor does he seem to notice the horrific casualties in war-torn countries these immigrants are trying to flee. Pastor Roger Jimenez of Verity Baptist Church in Sacramento said after the Orlando, Florida terrorist attack on a gay nightclub, quote, "The tragedy is that more of them didn't die. The tragedy is that I'm kind of upset he didn't finish the job." This, quote, minister of God showed no compassion for the families of men and women who died. He appeared incapable of laying aside his religious beliefs for even a moment. And recently, Kim Higginbotham, a minister's wife and teacher with a master's degree in special education, according to her website, wrote a public blog called Giving Your Child to the Devil. She claimed being a disciple of Jesus demands our relationship to him to be greater than relation to our own family, even our own children. She quotes Matthew 10. In a self-righteous and self-aggrandizing martyr's rant, she claims her son turned her back on God and she was left with no other option but to abandon him. It turns out her son is gay. There you go. But mostly, rather than calling these people out for sociopathic behavior, fellow Christians agree with them. Many of the comments on Higginbotham's website say, "So sorry for your loss, praying for you and your son." Just a couple more paragraphs, Andy Bear. It's common for us to avoid cognitive dissonance when our beliefs dictate one thing, but our experiences show us something else is true. We call this living in denial. We do it on one level or another. But when we choose our truth while coldly watching a fellow human being suffer, we've crossed the line of mental health. The 2016 election demonstrated an especially high level of insincerity, shamelessness, poor judgment, and pathological egocentricity among evangelical Christians. James Dobson, who once said of Bill Clinton that character does matter, you can't run a family, let alone a country, without it. How foolish to believe that a person who lacks honesty and moral integrity is qualified to lead the nation and the world. So we said that about Clinton, and then said of Donald Trump, I'm not under any illusions that he's an outstanding moral example, but it's a cliche that is true. We are electing a commander-in-chief, not a theologian-in-chief. So boom, here we go. Here's the closing line. The evangelical Christian message is loud and clear. They care for no one but themselves. Their devotion is to the version of Christianity they have created, which calls for ruthless abandonment of immigrants, women, children, even their own, and anyone else who doesn't fall in line with their message. Social justice, which is mentioned in the Bible verses over 2,000 times, has been replaced with hardline political ideology, principle over people, indifference over involvement, judgment over generosity. Okay. I guess we're calling time out on that article. So just a couple of thoughts in response, my brother Brad. First of all, if I were sitting across from the author, I would be nodding my head in much agreement with the article. There are some sections of evangelical Christianity that are absolutely toxic, that are abhorrent, that bring shame to Jesus, and should absolutely be shouted down. I mean, no question about it. By other Jesus followers. I mean, these people do not represent Jesus of Nazareth. It's the Gospels present him. So, on the one hand, the article's right. On the other hand, it's easy to cherry pick the worst examples from any belief system. So let me tell you about atheists who've murdered people, or let me tell you about Muslims who have murdered people, or let me tell you about feminists who've been awful, right? I mean, it's kind of an ad hominem fallacy, namely that the character of the person making the attack is what is at issue rather than the arguments they're making. And so I could easily put other examples forward from other belief systems. So granted, there is a branch that is entirely too large of evangelical Christianity that clearly sees being politically correct, not politically correct as liberals define it, but like correct in their politics and aligning their politics with the kingdom of God, or thinking they're aligned. That subsection is way too large, and I think is often very guilty of the things that you are, that this article is critiquing. So absolutely, the first thing I'd say is, yes, I see that's true. But secondly, I would say, I can point you to more examples of people who are shouting those people down, who are prophetic witnesses for what is good, true, and right and beautiful, who are campaigning behind the scenes for things like foster care and the end of sexual trafficking and things we'd all agree with need to happen. The number of people I know who are crossing the bridges to the LGBTQ community because of people like this minister, quote unquote, who said that he was bummed they didn't finish the job. So I actually think what is happening isn't that evangelical Christianity is sociopathic. It's that evangelical Christianity is in the midst of a huge division that is happening now between those who are sick and tired of Jesus following being identified with conservative politics and conservative policies, and those of us who see that Jesus transcends all of those things, that no political party can capture him. He's neither left nor right. He's something entirely different. And that crew of us, believes that, yes, you can sit in a room with political conservatives and political liberals, but that division shouldn't trump should not trump the commonality we have in this Jesus and through this Jesus. And so what we try to do in our community is we've got a guy that sits in the front row with a big Trump t-shirt on, and he's sitting next to people who were weeping the night Trump was elected. So we've talked a lot about how the table of Jesus is the one thing that kind of can hold those tensions. But I think that the last point I'll say is this. For those of us who care about how Jesus looks to the world, we absolutely should care about what this article is saying, whether or not we think it's true.
Right. So
Paul, if you study the letters of Paul cared a ton about the reputation Jesus following had with, quote, outsiders. We have to care about this. And it's for that reason that counter voices, counter narratives have to be put forward, so that the only quotes out there aren't just the quotes from the nut jobs.
Yeah.
And the people that are totally, hypocrites. Although, let's be honest, I mean, we're all kind of hypocritical. So it's not like you're going to find a non-hypocrite. It's just how big a gap are we talking about, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting and inciting article. Mm-hmm. I think that on the one hand, it's true. On the one hand, it's false. If I were to say something about the gay community is X, the immediate pushback is, well, you can't like level it like that.
Right.
And the same is true with evangelical Christianity.
Right.
There are so many branches in it, and many are critiquing that brand.
Right.
So it's not just Jesus followers being silent, although some, are in agreement. I think there are others of us who are very vocal.
Right. And I think it's that we have to be careful with name calling. It's like, okay, sure. We define the sex of, based on psychological terminology that, okay, yeah, it's become sociopathic. Okay, great. Now you've got a term for it, but now what? See, at the end of the day, we're still trying to, not we, but collectively, the thing we have to do is look at the result of what's happening and try to do something about what's happening.
Right.
And try to bring account for that stuff. I mean, whatever, kind of typecasting you want to put on this thing, it's, yeah, sure, maybe, we can align those things with that, but it's like, okay, but then what? It's like, other than giving, a word, on your tongue to use when you bring up, evangelical conservative Americans. Yeah.
Yep. I feel compelled to write a response to the Rob Bell interview. I appreciate that you had him on and that you were willing to present a variety of views on the podcast. I found Rob's view of Scripture to be high, in quotes, and I don't mean stoned, but his view of God to be missing, like he has removed God from the picture. I felt unsettled listening to the interview because it felt like God was robbed of all glory. I know you weren't necessarily agreeing with him, but I was surprised by the sarcasm in your questions about God's role in Scripture. Several times you came off as condescending towards those who have a more God-centered view of Scripture versus human-centered, if that's the right way to put it. Isaiah 55, 9 through 10 comes to mind. I'm not sure this was your intention, but I felt some red flags go up for me. Either way, I thought it might be helpful to hear how that came across. Still love you and look forward to future podcasts. All right. So I don't know if you know this, Andy, but we had an interview with Rob Bell.
I've heard.
And in that interview, and I've said since, we did this with Greg Boyd, and we're going to do this with others coming on the show. Our job is to make it as comfortable for them to express the highlights of their thinking, and to not spend time in the show critiquing their thinking. We want to encourage it. We want to cheer it on. We want to, and some will say, yeah, but you're exposing people to heresy, to bad theology.
We're abusing our platform.
Right. And my response to that is severalfold. Number one, the people are listening to Rob, whether we're comfortable with them listening to him or not.
Right.
His views have to be engaged. He speaks so much to the millennial crowd. Not only that, there was a great review of his book that said, hey, here are 4 things I like, here are 4 things I don't like. But if it gets people who would never pick up the Bible to pick up the Bible, that's a good freaking thing. And your view of Rob depends on whether you view him as a pastor or a missionary. If you view him as a pastor, well, he doesn't talk about Jesus as much as we'd like, or he talks about the divine instead of the Father. He talks about, rising consciousness and whatever. And so that, could it be a drift into New Age and all this stuff? Okay, sure. If you see him as a missionary and him trying to engage with people who would never engage with Jesus, the Bible, Christianity in any other context, okay, I mean, I could see that I'd make similar decisions down the road about, okay, so I wouldn't be trumpeting God as Father or God as man in the circles he's running in, right? I get it. So I just am always perplexed, though, because of that he's somehow the dividing line between liberal and conservative. And so I hear, young lady, her name's Kelly, wrote this in. Kelly, I hear you. And as Rob himself said, his view of the Bible really, really focuses on the human side of this, not on the God side. So I agree that we spent and that he spends very little time on the God side of this, and that is one of the critiques, I think, of the book that's fair. Is okay. Well, as if you read the chapters on inspiration and those sorts of things, it really kind of fleshes it out in a way that's like, I'm not so sure I buy it. Right. But I would buy 80% of what he's saying. Absolutely. And so in terms of being condescending, I was trying to represent the often very simplistic views or objections that people are going to have to his way of thinking. And I could see how that could come across as condescending if you hold those views, because I just called them simplistic. But I do think there are more nuanced views that better represent what Scripture is than just a flat, hey, it's the infallible Word of God. I just don't think that captures exactly what the Bible is. Right. So my apologies for coming off as condescending. I definitely don't want to do that. But I was also trying to egg Rob on to do it in a way that didn't feel like we were critiquing him, but do it like with an imaginary interlocutor.
Right.
Interlocutor.
And I would, even from where I say, I would love to say that we don't hear people respond that way, the way you played that role. But unfortunately, that is how we hear people respond. Right. Like, people respond that defensive. It's not that we're being condescending, but that's.
Well, I could see where it sounded.
I understand that, but I'm wrestling with unfortunately, if people weren't like that, then I would be a bit more
Yeah, but there are people like that.
Yeah.
So, dear Kelly, thank you for letting us know how it came across. I really appreciate that. And so thank you for still loving us and looking forward to future podcasts, even though you didn't like that particular one. I think that's very cool. The Vox Mailbag, dude. I mean, seriously, Andy, it's like how many pages? The whole podcast is just me reading questions. All right, here's another one. This is a good one. The subject is, hey, Andy and Mike. I know I mentioned Andy first, so don't get upset, Mike. My name is so-and-so. I've been to a couple of churches. I've listened to the podcast. First, I'd like to say that you do an absolutely fantastic job of creating space for conversations to happen. In fact, I sent your podcast to family members. It has been a springboard to conversations about faith. From what I've heard, one of the goals from the creation of the podcast, I am involved with the Alpha course, and I view this as another avenue to open up dialogue about faith. So I love that. You are also extremely articulate in describing topics about faith that I personally find difficult to properly word. So I think he was saying that to you.
Oh,
no, he wasn't. He was saying that to me. Secondly, you've helped me put teeth on some thoughts or ideas that I had about church not feeling much like Jesus. I love that it is the red letters where you start and everything else flows from there. That way, our motto that you approach these as if you are the biggest sinner in the room is the kind of humility I hope to display. All right, thank you. But here it comes. Lastly, now that in my premarital course, they said you should always give compliments before giving a critique. So here it comes.
Teed up.
Well, I love that you start with the red letters of Jesus' words. I'm nervous about the embarrassed by the Bible, not for the reason you think. I actually like the name and have a sense of humor. I'm nervous for my guy Paul, because sometimes it seems as if you are bashing Paul with the rhetoric, the Gospel of Paul, that you have mentioned on multiple occasions. I really enjoy Paul's writing. Now, I'm sure if that is how you... I'm not sure if that's how you want to come across, but that's the impression that I get. I don't remember names often, but some famous theologian said something to the effect, if the Bible was a wedding ring, Romans would be the diamond and Romans 8 would be the sparkle. Also, I heard you compare ableism to racism, and as a black American, that kind of irked me in the same way that it does when the gay community tries to claim that their struggle is the same as ours, albeit I do not have the same understanding that y'all do, and saying I dated a girl who had a brother with Down syndrome is like saying I have a black friend. So now that's out of the way, I've attempted my best to be specific for you. As far as your live showings go, it feels like they're a Patreon supporter only type of deal, which is not true at all. You are more than welcome, but always give 2 compliments before you critique. All right, so I say that because I get first dibs, and there are like 100 of them, and the venues are usually about 50 people. If you are looking for podcast suggestions, I would love to hear your take on what happens when you base a relationship with God off of fear like they do in some churches as a means of scaring people into faith. All right, so there's a whole bunch here.
Loaded.
First,
I actually did reply to him regarding the tie to...
ableism.
Yes.
Let's get to that in a second. I want to get to Paul. So first of all, thank you for this specific feedback. Thank you for the encouragement, the compliments, and we love the specific feedback. I have made loads of people nervous about the whole Paul thing. When I say the Gospel of Paul, I don't mean to denigrate Paul. I am denigrating the reformational understanding of how it's been interpreted by our Calvinistic friends' understanding of Paul. And I would disagree entirely with the Romans is the gospel and Romans 8 is the sparkle. That is absolutely not true. The gospel is the gospels. All right? That's the core of the message. And that's exactly the point and the problem I have. It's not Paul. Paul does a brilliant job transitioning a Jewish Messiah and a Jewish worldview into a completely different kind of Roman Greek understanding. Totally. And and Paul had his own quirks, and it's awesome. The issue I have is that we elevate the words of Paul over the words of Jesus. And so that the Gospel of Romans becomes the gospel.
Yeah.
That's not true. Paul only uses the idea of justification 3 places in 3 of his letters, and they all are in Judaizing contexts. Other places, it's adoption, it's reconciliation, it's redemption. I mean, this isn't the only metaphor. What we've done with Paul is we've chosen one image, just one image he uses, and we've made that the gospel. Not only that, but when Jesus preaches about the kingdom of God, Jesus is preaching to Jews, I get it, but Paul still captures some of that language in Jesus as Lord and in other places. The highlight for me of the Bible, it's not Romans. Sorry. The Romans road isn't the gospel. It's just not. The gospel is the availability of the kingdom of God through the death, burial, resurrection, ascension, and the pouring out of the Holy Spirit through Jesus. That's the gospel, and that has to do with something here and now, as well as something that happens when we die. Paul does a phenomenal job translating that gospel using a variety of images into different Greek contexts. But see, why would we just privilege one? I just totally object to that whole way of thinking. So instead of apologizing to you, my friend, I'm doubling down. But I'm a fan of Paul. Ephesians is one of my favorite books. What Paul does in church life is phenomenal. But you cannot, you can, and we have, but you cannot simply say that Romans is the gospel. And that's one snapshot.
Yeah.
But that's like saying, hey man, I've got 4 tires, and so I have a car. No, that's not true. There's more to a car than just the 4 tires. There's more to the gospel than just Romans. Not a great analogy, but okay. So you responded on the ableism thing. What was your response there?
I agreed that perhaps a straight line between the idea of racism and ableism is a bit incorrect. I appreciated what Micah had said on our show a few weeks ago about defining prejudice in the way that we inherit a certain view and we're limited in what we grow up in. So then we come accustomed to thinking something is a certain way, and then we're actually exposed to it. Right. Suddenly we realize the gap and the difference. Meaning, like when he shared his experience about going to Moody and was talking to a white friend, and he's like, I got to be honest with you, I've never had a conversation with a black guy. Right. Wow. And so it's like that, he was defining like that's prejudice. It's like, racism is the actions in which we use the prejudice for forms of hate and exclusivity and all of that type of thing. Right. So I agreed that like our conversation on relating to ableism and racism, it would be a bit incorrect, but I would say it would be more correct to prejudice. So how a lot of folks look at people with special needs largely comes from what they inherit, how they see those people without ever experiencing them, spending time with them, and then realizing like, oh, okay, I've got this view completely wrong, I've been handed a bad card on it. So that was just that was my response to that. I thought that was actually a completely fair comment that he made about that. It's like, yeah, that was probably off. We probably used that term a bit too loosely.
Okay, fair. Look at us.
Mailbag.
It is. Some of you are like, you've turned it up to like 2 times the normal speed to just get through it. All right, another one. This is from Eric. Eric writes, our small group is listening to your Vox podcast as our weekly study, which is very cool.
Great. We're coming out with a DVD and a curriculum and also a book to go along with it, my friend.
They have really helped our group grow. Thank you. I listened to episode 7 podcast today, and I agree with Mike when he said that he could be completely wrong. I think he is completely wrong. Oh. So it's an agreement about not being wrong. I love it. And I think this was, I don't know, immigration or something. Yes, we should invite Muslims and Syrians into our homes and our lives. That's our personal obligation as Christians. And as a Christian nation, we have an obligation to help the Syrians. We also have several choices as a nation. We can admit 10,000 to 100,000 Syrians into our country, certainly helping them, those admitted. We might let in some terrorists, and we could change the morals, customs, and values of some of our communities, because most of the Syrians don't have our country's value systems and won't integrate into our system. Or we can do another choice, set up safe zones in Syria itself, certainly putting our soldiers at risk, but protecting millions of Syrians, not hundreds of thousands. Now, Mike's podcast is old, so he might not have seen many of the results of Syrian migration into Europe, but I think he is misguided on this podcast. I might be wrong, because I think neither of our positions are solidly grounded in the Bible. One other objection, he stated that we should turn off the Christian fear complex by turning off Fox News and Glenn Beck, but these shows are not Christian, they are conservative. But my friend, those two often get conflated, at least where we live. So I think the point still stands. Mm-hmm. They typically don't give Christian or religious views or commentary, blah, blah, blah. ABC, CBS, and NBC are liberal, but I wouldn't say they're anti-Christian. Okay, perfect. The problem, however, is for many in our country that conservative and Christian have gone together. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to divorce that. So I'm like, okay, I hear you, but disagree. In terms of whether or not I'm wrong about immigration, certainly could be. And yes, I love that you distinguish between our obligations as Christians, which are to love immigrants and welcome the stranger. I love that you admit that that is the way we should go personally. And that as a nation, there are other options. Great. I have no issue. I do have an issue with a blanket no, politically. But like we've said many times here, my primary job isn't to tell the kingdom of the world how to best run the kingdom of the world. It's just that when people who claim to be Christians say that immigration isn't a biblical issue, like Franklin Graham has, I couldn't disagree more. And I think there have to be other Christian voices out there saying, well, I think it is a biblical issue. And I think the posture of the church is always one of welcome and hospitality and not fear. Mm-hmm. If there are more effective ways to protect Syrian refugees, fantastic. I'm all for it. But we should not let fear dictate the church's response. So there you go. Wrong again. I am. You want to say something? You got the look like I want to say something.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to say anything that gets in trouble.
Well, that's a first. All right. So Mike, just finished podcast 80. May I place in your inbox positive statements and feedback, gearing you up for your next negative feedback. So this was nice. I appreciate the way you were true of being honest about everything. You were doing a great job of being real. I definitely don't have the same opinions as you these days, but boy, do I love that you were willing to talk about these issues. Great job. Keep up the good fight. Best to you, Justina and Andy. So Christy, thank you for that. And I love that you're listening and that you don't completely agree. The goal of the Vox podcast is not that you would share my opinions or our opinions. The goal is that you would begin to wrestle in community with the tensions of how Jesus following plays out in the morally ambiguous kind of world we're living in. And that you would become people committed, that we would become people committed to making Jesus beautiful in our role as peacemakers in the world. Mm-hmm. And so that's the goal. So I love that you are engaging. Thank you for your sweet encouragement. But the biggest compliment to me was that you don't agree with everything and you still listen and benefit. So Thank you for that. A couple more, Andy. Do we got time?
Yeah, we got time.
Okay. So I don't know, this could be the most boring podcast we do, or this could be set a new record for the amount of mail answered. Okay. I want to begin by saying that in my 35 years of life, I've never written a feedback response to any production. I generally don't feel that my feedback is needed. I typically feel that people share their opinions much too often anyhow. In the Yelp world, that's probably true. But today was different. After listening to your podcast and how you respond to criticism, I was overcome with several emotions. I was once again reminded of how brutal and hateful Christians could be. Growing up as a child of God, a child of a God-fearing pastor, we were exposed countless times to sinister remarks from those within the walls of the church and beyond. But to be honest, I had laid many of those memories to rest until you spoke today. The podcast could not have come at a better time, on the verge of taking on additional leadership roles within my church, and feel a strong sense of calling to speak in whatever venue, platform God has chosen for me. Your words were a good reminder that even when you are in God's will, there will be pain and criticism, remarkably from those we call brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus. My husband and I have learned so much from you. I realize this email is more than likely one of thousands that come through. Well, no, they don't come through. Andy just hoards them. But just the same, I want you to know that you're making a difference. You are changing lives. Your love for people is palatable. Well, that's nice. Andy doesn't feel that way, but I think in general...
I'm yawning over the mention of kindness.
Yes. So thank you. Thank you, Molly. Appreciate the encouragement.
Yeah.
Big time. And I wasn't sharing that to just be poor me, although it's funny, those were the nice ones. I was reading through them, and I literally have hundreds of emails, and people will wonder, why the heck are you saving them? And I'm like, well, just to show, the people don't think this really happens in church. Oh, Christian Pettit. Christian Pettit is a friend of mine from Miami of Ohio back in the day. Just wanted to send you a quick email, let you know I've been listening to your podcast recently, have found it to be thought-provoking and helpful. Lisa and I recently transitioned from working with Cru, which is Campus Crusade for Christ, used to be, Cru Campus, to working with Cru Cities Ministry. We're working with 20-somethings in Indianapolis. And as we sought to be learners, I found the topics that you were covering to be very relevant. Awesome.
Oh, good.
I'm so glad that helps.
Oh.
And so I'm literally just going through a stack of email right now in real time.
IRL. Email IRL.
All right, so this is from Cole on Rob Bell. Love this episode. Would you guys mind unpacking the documentarian hypothesis for listeners and share your thoughts and study on it? I heard Rob drop a bunch of DH terms and beliefs. Thanks for what you do, guys. Team Andy Bear is what he wrote. So he will be getting no response from me.
Documentarian hypothesis. I had not heard of that.
Oh my goodness. Well, it comes in different forms. The original hypothesis was that there were 5 different communities or individuals that stranded together the Old Testament, particularly the Torah. Yeah, excuse me. Sorry.
There's a documentarian hypothesis right there.
In a world where burping is awful, one man stands above the rest. All right, so that there was a priestly editor, a Levitical editor. I think there was a, I don't know. They're represented by different letters, and the idea is that you can trace strands of grouped thought that seem to be fragmented throughout the text and woven together. And so for folks, it's an older hypothesis. I don't even know how much in vogue it still is or not, so I can't really speak to it much. I would agree with the hypothesis that there were editors involved in putting this sucker together, and it's not like just Moses sat down and wrote it when Deuteronomy includes his own death, and he obviously wasn't there when God created the world, so right. So I'm totally fine with the idea that communities or groups of communities put the sacred text together under the guidance of God's leading. So I have no problem with it, but that's just, there's a lot more to say.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Sounds like it. We're working on our own Bible over here, actually.
The Vox Bible?
Yeah.
Mike and Andy, just listened to the Hiddenness of God episode. Wanted to say thank you. I've heard sermons on the topic before. Having grown up in the church, I generally know the doctrinal answers related to these questions. But your response was so vulnerable and transparent, and you let us see where you struggle with this too. I'd rather not. I'd rather just be awesome. It's so refreshing to hear theology lumped in with struggle and pain instead of triumph and togetherness. God used you both, which is unfortunate, to speak to me in ways I haven't heard before. So in all of this, I wanted to say thank you. Vox listener from the beginning, David. David, thank you so much, my man. So glad that was helpful. Hate sharing that stuff. I wanted to forget. I literally hated that episode. Don't want to ever talk about it again. I am so not happy with having to struggle in the midst of all this stuff.
Some have called it our best episode yet.
Well, yeah, they haven't obviously listened to the Rob Bell interview. All right, so here's another Rob Bell issue. All right, are you ready? How long are we?
Surprise. 40 minutes.
Okay, all right, that's not too bad.
Yeah, we're fine.
All right, hi, Mike and Andy. Been listening to you guys on and off for the past year from a friend's recommendation. First of all, why ever off? I mean, that's ridiculous. That we should never be off.
I listen to us on and off.
Well, that's true, but we should never be off. I listen to a few other podcasts from time to time as well, but yours is the only one that hasn't annoyed me after a while.
Oh, well, you haven't listened long enough.
Yeah, exactly. Give us time. And I love that. The Vox podcast, we suck less.
If you switch the off part of your comment and you're just on, then I think you'll arrive at that conclusion.
So thumbs up to you guys for keeping it real, casual, funny, and normal without seeming to try too hard. True. It's my first time writing in. I'm doing so because of the interview with Rob Bell. Wanted to share my thoughts on it, and then perhaps... and him perhaps too. First off, no doubt he's a super smart guy. He's a thinker. He's scholarly in his love and appreciation for texts. And with the amount of that he thinks about God, he's also a theologian. And most, if not all, of what he said was smart, wise-sounding stuff. What he's saying makes sense. But I wonder if he would even call himself a Christian. The only time he mentioned Jesus was when he talked about the narrative of the sacred text, the Bible, and how it has shifted or matured people to move away from mysticism and how Jesus was a part of that. My question is, how can you talk about God so much and not talk passionately about the saving work that Jesus did on our behalf? And in our struggle to answer life's biggest questions and our common quest to seek redemption, paraphrased, how did Jesus not enter the talk then? How was Jesus not the focus of the entire conversation? It's as if Rob Bell knows all the realities and humanity's struggle for its entire existence, but isn't willing to point to Jesus as the only answer. The only conclusion I can draw is he doesn't believe Jesus is the only answer.
From our podcast, from one episode.
Well, no, he's read other books.
Okay.
He believes in rising consciousness. As he talks about the constant improving of humanity over time, he neglects the whole issue of sin itself. If we've improved as humans since the time of Moses, how did the 20th century become the bloodiest and most evil since the onset of humanity? My issue is this, and I've thought a lot about this recently when I look at myself. Are we really getting better? Am I a better person than I was when I wasn't a Christian? In other words, has my struggle with sin been getting easier? The answer is no. While I may improve some bad thoughts, the issue with sin is only magnified. I'm now more aware of sin and my need for God than before I knew him. I ought to be getting better and showing more signs of God's Spirit in me, and I am, and I do. But the issue of me being a sinner and need for Jesus is the only answer only gets more abundantly clear. So as my awareness grows over time, it really only grows to give God glory, not myself. Based on my issues with Rob Bell, and so anytime you call him Rob Bell, you know, and my belief that he might not be a Christian, and your limited understanding of me and where I am in terms of my faith standpoint, do you think I'm misunderstanding any of Rob's point of views? Am I missing the point on anything here? And I'm also dying to hear a follow-up from you about questions you would like to ask him that you didn't. Questions that questions that you have after thinking more about his statements. In other words, what points would you grill him on, and do you think he would be satisfied even in disagreement with his answers? And do you think you would be satisfied? Thanks again. Great interview. It was like hearing from an old friend who went off the tracks, but an old friend nevertheless. All right. So this is from CJ. So CJ, thank you for the question, and a couple of thoughts. First of all, I don't know what Rob would call himself. I know people have spent a lot of time judging the motives of his heart and the practice, and so I have not done that. I wish sometimes he'd get back to the old dust of my Rabbi Rob Bell that was so influential to me. Absolutely. But do I sometimes wonder if what he's really doing is translating Christianity into a new generation of people that would never engage with it? Sometimes I wonder that, know, do you the talk of divine versus the talk of the Father? I mean, like we said before, so on, so on, so on. Of course, the danger is in doing that you just become as murky and lukewarm and whatever is kind of the culture around you. But I'm not in a very good place to make that judgment on the basis of that interview or the reading of his books. So I kind of go, I don't know if you're misreading him. I just think, I don't know that I want to know why it's important to you to figure that out.
Yeah. That's
the question I would have, CJ, is like, okay, why is that important to you? Just sift and sort what he says. Regardless of whether or not you think he's a Christian. I mean, okay, God judges that. I have no interest in whether or not he calls himself that or not. I have an interest in the ideas he's presenting and what of them are true and what of them are not true. He's someone who's endeavoring to answer some of the biggest questions about the Bible, questions that we hear all the time on our podcast, and felt like, man, this is a guy we definitely want to hear from. It still puzzles me why the labeling of him good or bad is still such an issue. I just don't. I'm not totally there yet, because no one is either good or bad, right? We know this. I mean, there's nuance in all of us, and so you should be sifting and sorting what I'm saying. I mean, and the problem with Christianity, at least as it's practiced in America, is we have our good guys and our bad guys. And the good guys, once they're in, they're in. We'd never question anything.
Right.
And the bad guys, once they're out, they're out. We should never listen to anything. And neither of those are true. John Piper says some things that are absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
John MacArthur says some things that are absolute crap. I mean, it's just true. I see some things that are utter nonsense. And Rob Bell freaking says some things that are good and true and right, and puts words to things that help people approach the faith who would never approach the faith otherwise. You just can't sit and say, well, he's a Christian or not, he should be listened to or not. I get that we've lost listeners because we put him on the show. Fine. Okay, there's a lot of like good solid, if you want just like the solid safe stuff, there's just a lot of that out there. And if you want just the like the milky, like, whoa, it's just shocking conversation, there's a lot of that out there. We're trying to walk this middle ground of peacemaking, where we sit with people who we don't always agree with, and we listen to what they have to say, and we enter into their stories, we enter into their theology, we enter in, and you know, some people think that's totally wrong to do. I just disagree.
Yeah.
I absolutely disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest too, like I'm a bit fatigued over the idea, because this isn't the first person who said this particular thing, but just like the expectation that because we do talk about Jesus on our podcast and Christianity as a whole, that it's expected that everything that we talk about has to have a direct tie, and Jesus has to be used in that thing. Like whether this happens outside in tons of other conversations, as if like, well, they didn't really mention Jesus, so I don't know if I'm in. You know, and it's just kind of blanketed on top of like, well, if they're not making that the forefront of the conversation, or if they're not obsessed about that aspect of the conversation, it's like, how many conversations are we allowed to have that you get through the whole thing? And yeah, there's no mention of Jesus, but when you read the Bible, tell me how much Jesus is mentioned in the Old Testament.
Everywhere.
You know?
According to some.
But I'm saying it's encapsulated in the understanding that he is there. You see, that's my problem, is like whether we make that the forefront point every time we turn this thing on record, to me is like, I would say there's something else to wrestle with if like you can't get through something and hear that all the time. I mean, it's for the same way that someone's like, I can't listen to a presidential interview or something unless I hear America, like, you know, mentioned every 5 seconds about the ideals of America every time. Otherwise, I don't believe it. Right. It's just like, I think we're a little smarter than that. I really do.
Right. And I don't hear CJ saying that. I think CJ's wrestling with, okay, this is what Christian theology is. Rob isn't doing Christian theology. So is he Christian? And okay, that's a fair question. I don't know the answer to that. I certainly know that Rob doesn't talk about Jesus as much as he used to, at least publicly. Yeah. That's true. But I don't know why. I don't know what's happening in his soul, what's happening with his relationship to the Father, the divine, however you want to say it. So yeah. I'm like, okay, I hear you. But it's like, the need to have him pegged is the thing that bugs.
And even in our interview, to hear him say that the best version of gathering he could imagine is a table, and at that table is the bread and the cup. Where do you get the bread and the cup unless it's not from Jesus?
Right.
Like who you see? I'm
Yeah, but I'm not in the business of defending whether he is or
no.
isn't.
Sure, I know.
I want to learn from people who are saying things.
Yep.
And he's someone I feel like I can learn from.
I agree.
But I sift and I sort, and CJ, it sounds like you're sifting and sorting too. I don't know if you're misunderstanding or not, because I don't know what he thinks about those issues. I mean, I don't know that sitting and saying, "Hey, Rob, are you a Christian?" is going to elicit the best things he's got to say.
Yeah, I don't think he is. No, I meant like I don't think he would. Like he wouldn't. I feel like that's the fire he's been under for years.
He's been attacked so freaking much.
Right.
So anyway, CJ, I totally hear what you're saying. I love that you're trying to clarify, am I misunderstanding him? And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I do feel like there are points of evidence where humanity is improving. Mm-hmm. So I don't agree. I don't agree with either side that says, like on the rapture, the conservative Left Behind crew, that's going to just get totally awful before, like there's no point in doing anything because we'll be raptured out of here anyway. I disagree with that. I have a little boy with Down syndrome. Andy has a little girl with Down syndrome. And I can tell you they're treated much better now than they were 50 years ago.
20 years ago.
Or women. You want to go back to women couldn't vote or are owning slaves, or, I mean, I'm just like, no, I think there have been things usually initiated or at least participated in by Christ followers that have been major cultural shifts that are good. But I disagree with those who think that it's nothing but an upward trajectory, and if we just had better technology and more education and everyone just got along, we'd be fine. No, because the issue, sin does reside in the human heart and affects us all. So I kind of disagree with what you're saying in terms of, well, unless you see it as all bad, then you're not really seeing it correctly. No, I see good all over the place. And so did Paul. Paul could affirm the writings of different Greek writers. Paul affirmed the Athenian culture. Paul could talk about creation was given for us to enjoy. And so I'm open to that. So I don't see it as all good or all bad, or getting all better or getting all worse. It's all nuanced, which, is another word for cowardice, according to some. But CJ, phenomenal question. All right. Yep. Do we have any, do I have one more? CJ, Andy, let's see, David. Nope. I got him.
That's
it. I got him.
We've gotten like 3 more since I sent you these, so we've...
Shut up.
Yeah.
Have we really?
Yeah.
Oh,
pretty
geez.
sure.
Okay, so typically, when Andy was on his game, I would get these as they came in. But this one was like, like 30 of them.
Let me tell you what throws me off my game.
Okay, what threw you? When I wear a tank top.
3 children.
Oh, don't. What a freaking... I have 3 children and I have game.
Yeah, but you didn't just have them.
It doesn't matter.
The third.
It doesn't matter. Listen, I was back to work the day after birth of number 3.
Listen, I'm humbly accepting the knowledge and wisdom that you would speak into as a fresh husband of 3 in your deep wealth of experience.
Oh, I have deep wealth. I've been a husband of 3 longer than you've been a husband, buddy.
That's correct.
So,
yes.
Or father of 3.
So you should know.
All right. So Andy Bear, first it was his workflow. Now it's his kids. You see the trend. But we love hearing from you, and we try. I mean, I want you to know there are a couple of things that are happening. One is we answer questions, and sometimes those get turned into podcasts. We answer questions at our church, and then we answer questions on Facebook. So right after now, we're going to turn the thing off. We're going to go on Facebook and answer more questions that came in. So we're going to email. I'm going to have Andy, who has 3 children, I'm going to include in his workflow, emailing all of you who emailed in saying, hey, we talked about your email on air. Okay, can you do that, Andy?
Okay.
Because I have a sermon to write for this week. I don't know what you got, but I got to actually show up Sunday and sound intelligent, which takes a lot of work.
Apparently.
So, Andy, man, for what you get paid, you should be thanking me.
Yeah, I get paid?
Oh, that's true. That's true. So always look on our Facebook page. What Facebook is that? Just the Vox Podcast Facebook page. So we answer some of your questions there. And again, I mean, guys, the point isn't the answers. I don't always think they're that great. And even when I think they're that great, no one remembers them or cares. The deeper issue is, hey, we're all on this journey together, and there's real power in encouraging each other, critiquing each other. So that's why I wanted to read the good ones and the critiques, because we're doing this in community, and we listen to what you say. We do. Sometimes louder than others, but we do wrestle with everything that comes in. So thank you for that. How do people send in emails?
Hello at the Vox Podcast. Hello at voxpodcast.com.
Okay, and voxpodcast.com is the place where the Vox Podcast is housed. Mm-hmm. There is a church that is associated with the podcast, which in our words, it's the liturgical expression of the podcast. And we just had 16 people over to my place in Brea last night from the church, and they were just new and wanted to find out more about it. And we were like, well, how'd you hear about it? And it was all podcast. Which was so fun and interesting. So if you're ever in North Orange County, you can check that out. If you've got another church to go to, man, go to that one, because we suck. We really do. We're not a tight ship. We don't even have a fog machine, for crying out loud. So anyway, that's all I got. You got anything, Andy Bear?
No.
Okay. So Seth Erre is going to do our blessing today. He has he comes, sometimes I'll come downstairs and I'll find him licking the microphone that I speak into, and which, so there'll be like little dregs of like chicken or whatever he's had to eat over the microphone. So if you notice, every now and again, like I'll try to switch microphones with you, but I think you're on that already.
Yeah.
So all right, so Seth Erre is going to do our blessing. Brothers and sisters, we love being a part of your life. Thanks for participating. Give us your feedback on this episode, because we have enough questions that we could do many of these. But thank you. Until next time.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Vox Podcast. Learn more about us at voxpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at the Vox Podcast, and now support us on Patreon at patreon.com/VoxPodcast.